What's up, guys? Thank you so much for your suggestions and your enthusiasm with 40K. You guys sending me like all kinds of comments with like walls of lore text. But yeah, someone suggested that I look more into all the different factions of Warhammer, and the specific video that they requested was like an hour long, which is a little bit too long. So I found this one that's like 20 minutes. So we'll jump into it here. It'll load.
Have you ever looked at
Here we go.
Warhammer 40K's absolute dearth of different factions and armies and wondered what actually the difference between them is? Well, wonder no longer, because today we're gonna go over
It's like a
every
long
single
list.
faction in Warhammer 40K in just 25 minutes. This video is gonna go pretty fast. So
What is that turtle? Oh, it's this guy's channel.
What's up, folks? Welcome
Tactical
to
Tortoise.
My name is Trevi, and today I'm going to be doing a
I love it.
rapid-fire overview.
It's like Blastoise, but without the water.
Faction in Warhammer 40K, and giving a 1 to 2
Physical damage
of every
Blastoise.
single faction in the game. The purpose of this video is mostly for newer players who might not be familiar with how each army plays on the tabletop. But we'll throw some memes in there, so hopefully, even if you're not new, you can still enjoy.
Yeah, I have no idea what's going
I'm
on.
also keep competitive talk and
I just know the guys look cool. The Space Marines, very generic. Sure, there's like sects of them, not sex. Divisions of them, I guess, is the better word.
The nomenclature I'm going to be using in the video today. I'm going to be breaking down everything by super factions, which are groups that contain multiple factions. A faction itself is basically a codex or an army. Detachments from different factions can be brought together in an army if all those factions are from the same super faction. Factions might also have sub-factions. These are things like Space Marine chapters that provide unique bonuses.
Okay, so like NATO,
inside
the armed forces, and then like special
actually works in 40K. I have a video
detachments.
that I will link down below.
I'm following.
So check that out if you have no idea what I'm talking about. I'm also going to omit some factions that aren't really armies by themselves and just add tools to the toolbox of a particular super faction, but I will give them a shout out when I cover each of the super factions individually. Let me know down in the comments if you find this style of video useful and would like some more in-depth content relating to each faction. I did one on
starting out really comprehensive, so
that a lot of people found useful, and I could restart that series if I get enough interest. Remember to drop a like and a sub and all that YouTube stuff that everybody tells you to do. You know the drill. If you find the video useful, that really helps let me know what kind of content people like, and then I can make more of that stuff, and you can watch it and all that stuff. In addition, if you want to see these factions in action, go ahead and check out our new YouTube channel at Tactical Tortoise TV. This channel hosts all of the VODs for our streams games that we stream over at twitch.tv/TacticalTortoiseTV, where we stream a ton of commentated,
all the self-promo. I love it.
Content. We're also building playlists for every single faction in the game. So if you want to see some top-level competitive play using each of these factions, go ahead and head over there. There's going to be a link down in the description, and you'll be able to find
competitive 40K. Like
anyway,
tabletop 40K? Interesting.
Starting with the Xenos factions, Imperium gets enough love, so we're going to save them to the end, and we're going to start with some wacky aliens.
Oh boy.
The first category we're going to talk about is miscellaneous Xenos factions. These do not have a super faction. You can only ever take them by themselves. They're poor, lonely, lost souls drifting in the void of space, and the first one to talk about is the Necrons. These are Egyptian robot skeleton men hailing from a time long past. The mid-1980s.
Egyptian robot skeleton men.
They pre-programmed themselves with command protocols that project useful auras to them throughout the game. They typically rely on relatively slow infantry, supported by faster beasts and swarms, with some
these guys look really cool.
To reposition them around the table, and
I like their like rib cage looking.
Good at stealing away objectives thanks to their
the armor? Or is it their body?
Hitting artillery also supports the army that's relatively powerful, but kind of inconsistent and ponderous to reposition, because they typically get penalized for moving and shooting their heavy weapons. They can also be supported by Catan shards, which are powerful.
Yeah, the little spider dudes.
That also
looks like
kind of like psychers with
like nanobots.
The faction in general has a lot of interesting and competitive lists builds available, so they tend to be pretty wide open and flexible if you want to forge your own style of army. Orcs are the most terrifying and obnoxious foe the galaxy has ever seen. Rabid football
Orcs with a K.
kind of
Interestingly.
like they teleport their army around the table and buff them with powerful psychic powers. They shoot literal hails of bullets because more DACA is more better. So much so that all of their ranged attacks generate extra shots occasionally thanks to their DACA rule.
It's with the
Their lists tend to be
checkering.
centered around big bricks of infantry that are good
Seems
at
just
charging
kinda
arms
out of
and
place.
killing other light infantry, but
Like, are they referees or
not
something?
much else. This infantry is also often supported by artillery, a variety of light and super heavy vehicles, and big beatsticks that offer powerful, if inconsistent, shooting.
That's pretty OP. They got
Tower
tanks.
Pirates faction made up entirely
A
of
Gundam?
Soviet
What?
fishmen in anime-style mecha suits.
Yes.
You know, that old trope that everybody complains that every sci-fi universe has.
What?
Those space Soviet fishmen. Tau formed the core of their army out of battlesuit units, which typically held their heaviest weapons.
This is
Tactical
unexpected.
drones are able to soak damage for their battlesuit units and other organics. They can generate a burst of speed or accuracy using special orders thanks to their master.
I really like how Gundams look. I've never collected them or anything.
They focus entirely
but they
on
are
ranged
really neat.
attacks and don't really compete in any.
I love the laser sword
Now
part of
let's move on to our
Gundams
first super faction.
as a
We'll start with the Eldari.
lightsaber lover.
They begin with A. And
It's very
that's how the
reminiscent.
alphabet works. All of the factions in the Eldari super faction are relatively fragile, but they tend to be hyper fast.
Ooh, that guy
in
looks
terms of
really cool.
maneuverability. Multiple ways to double move
Like
your
his sword
units, move out of phase,
and the
etc. Eldari armies
shoulder
tend to be
poof.
difficult to play thanks to their low resilience, but reward
Space elves. Oh yeah, that makes sense.
Shout out to their kind of weird sub-faction, the
Elvish
Yunari.
looking.
This is a sub-faction that contains only a couple character units that can slot into detachments of any other Eldari faction, and optionally supersede their sub-faction traits with their own Yunari trait, which is focused a little bit more on tankiness and regenerating their models, as well as melee damage output over the other Eldari sub-faction abilities. Moving on to the Craftworlds faction, these are the classic Space Elf boys. In fact, they're just one step away from wearing green and carrying bows and arrows. They're in the running for the game's best psychers and back up powerful gun lines with a lot of decent indirect fire and heavy shooting with a bunch of combos.
That the tanks in the back look like the tanks from Star Wars, like in the Phantom Menace.
Their army with wraith units and invulnerable saves, but mostly rely on speed and maneuverability to get.
They probably
Drukhari are
took
sexy
inspiration
dark
from
elves
those, actually.
directly out of some Chinese MMO. They have no psychers to speak of at all, unlike all of the other.
Because yeah, someone
and gain army-wide special abilities
pointed out to me in the comments. Thank you again. That 40K has been around for a long time. Ooh, I like the little speeder bike that guy has. It's very cool. You got goblin gliders too.
We'll talk about them next and gain advantages
Space pirate kind of thing going on.
Melee with them. Lastly, Homunculus, who use big beefy flesh constructs and mutated Hellraiser rejects to be uncharacteristically tanky. Probably the toughest to kill subfaction out of all of the Eldari. Last but not least, Harlequins are literally just killer clowns from outer space.
That's terrifying. Are you guys scared of clowns? Leave it in the comments.
Kind of survivable, given that the entire faction has universal invulnerable saves, negative hit.
Clowns are pretty creepy, but I gotta say, one of my favorite movies is
They're also impossible to pin down.
It, the newer It movies. Really, really good.
Crescendo abilities, which essentially allow them to ignore almost every downside of the movement phase forever. They can fall back and advance and do basically whatever they want, regardless of the position of enemy models, which is pretty sick. Let's move on to our next super faction.
Yeah, the clowns kind of seem out of place. Just like I just did not expect that to be a part of the universe.
The community granted the term is Forces of the Hive Mind because it's a little bit less confusing, given that one of the factions inside it is.
That's cool.
So that's
I'm glad you're enjoying this, Zora.
Large or just particularly numerous units of infantry with lots of deep striking and movement shenanigans to play keep away and score objectives. They also have a lot of control effects that stifle powers, movement, or stratagems, for example. And shout out to Astra Militarum, interestingly, an Imperium faction who can be brought with Genestealer Cult, one of the factions in the sub-faction, as Brood Brothers to gain access to their units.
Cults? Okay.
Remove most of their sub-faction.
Now, I'm interested.
Technically can be brought as part of this.
I don't know why, but cults are really interesting to me.
First up, Tyranids themselves are what happens when a xenomorph from Alien and a bug from Starship Troopers love each other very much.
Oh, we don't like that.
It's my favorite faction, so clearly it's the best in the game.
Oh, those kind of look like
they make their units effectively
the elites in Halo,
with synapse
a little bit
generated by their leader units, but their units
again probably inspired
if they're ever outside of that synapse range. The faction
from
is
this.
a good all-rounder, but has a focus on super fast movement, double moves.
Also, some like Ravengers in I think that's what they're called in World of Warcraft. Have those like scythe kind of like fucking hand things.
Lots of small and annoying
like the guy in the middle there.
Units backed up by the heavy hitter monsters to actually deal damage. Gene stealer cults are disenfranchised workers of the Imperium rising up to seize the means of production. And also some of them have 3 arms and look like Klingons, but definitely don't worry about that at all. They're here for your own good. They have a unique deployment style that lets them choose to reserve large parts of
Wait, what? Do they specifically have 3 arms and not 4 arms? That's really weird.
Their opponent's first movement phase. That's
Wonder. Yeah, it looks like they have 3 arms, not 4.
Light infantry and try to catch their opponent off
Weird.
guard with overwhelming strikes out of reserve, which are supported by lots of stratagems and character buffs. Moving on to the Chaos Super Faction. These are the big baddies of the Warhammer 40k universe. They're basically made up of lots of independent warbands and factions sworn to worship one of the 4 Chaos gods, either Khorne, Slaanesh, Tzeentch, or Nurgle. In general, the Super Faction tend to rely on intricate combos to supercharge big Death Star characters or units with insane power. The Chaos
insane power.
Have a unique morale mechanic that randomly allows them to regain models from morale tests.
Chaos demons, is that how
most factions do? They are broken into 4
odd spelling of demon
of their own with their own unique units and with almost no crossover. One for each.
I hate that.
Units in
I don't know if you guys can see it.
a single Chaos God
There's a
also benefit from powerful
big
warriors
Jabba the Hutt
by their characters.
festering blob the bottom left. Is that a dragon?
Tzeentch deals with range
fuck?
damage with short-range guns and psychic powers. Slaanesh brings lightly armored but super fast.
How's that a demon?
Hordes, while Nurgle focuses entirely on.
I guess you could have a demon dragon. There's nothing stopping that from happening. There's Gundams in this, I guess, and elves.
And also kind of worse. They're organized.
These guys, chonky boys.
Sub-factions that get a bunch of unique abilities and are able to
Chaos Marines
as troops rather than elites.
Okay.
In this case, Emperor's Children gets you Noise Marines as troops, and World Eaters gets Berserkers. They have lots of damage buffing stratagems and support-focused psychic powers and auras that can concentrate power into small units and force multiply very effectively for big combo finishes on your opponent. Death Guard are Nurgle-focused Chaos Space Marines.
Ooh, I like the sound of that, Death Guard.
Down with the sickness. They're very slow, but ridiculously fast. Invulnerable saves, damage reduction, and damage
down with the sickness.
Available almost everywhere across the faction. They also project unique contagion auras.
I appreciate their camouflage. Not sure how much of the environment they're going to be fighting in is jungle, but they got the camo going.
That are also from Egypt and also robot skeleton
or forest.
Not to be confused with Necrons because
woodlands.
They are not from the mid-1980s. They have an excellent psychic phase. Almost all of their unit champions are sorcerers that are psychers and able to cast their support.
These guys are more like Egyptian,
psychers as well.
Maybe
teleport around the table
Aztec-ish.
At close range and deal lots of damage.
Look like pharaohs or something.
Offensive spells, and in some situations they can tank reasonably well with faction-wide decent invulnerable saves in ways to buff them. Lastly, in the super faction, Chaos Knights are basically Imperial Knights, what we'll talk about later, but spikier and also maybe better, actually, this time. They're a faction built
okay, these are mechs, right?
Combat walkers, either Titans or smaller vehicles called War Dogs. They basically have the same units as Imperial Knights, but each one has more flexibility in terms of the war gear it's allowed to take, and they're more offensively oriented. Several of their mechanics are self-destructive in nature and allow them to buff their stats at the expense of damage or other similar drawbacks. Now,
never been a big fan of that, having to like damage yourself to do your abilities. It makes me like anxious.
Faction that most of the fluff is based around, and therefore they get the most support in terms of models and factions. The super faction is so diverse that it's hard to quantify a consistent theme for them. But if I were to pick one, I'd say that Imperium factions tend to rely on relatively slow, heavily armored units more so than other super factions. Of the power armor factions in the game, meaning those with a 3+ armor save almost universally across the faction,
Got like a
Imperium has the most in that style, and even
future
non-power
like
armor
Space Van
factions
Helsing
rely
vibe
on
going
a lot
on
of
there.
vehicles. They also tend towards relatively slow and inflexible game plans, more so than a super faction like Tyranids or Eldari. Some shoutouts to some little mini factions. Inquisition is one of them, which gives access to any Imperium faction to a handful of toolbox characters and units that can be included in any army to unlock some useful psychic powers. And
Is that an orangutan? I just realized.
Assassinorum, which can bring Imperial
Weird.
Assassins, which are powerful damage-dealing characters that can be swapped out with one another before each game to take the one with the abilities most suited for the matchup that you're playing. Now let's get into the many factions of the Imperium and start with the Space Marines. These are the power armored poster boys of Warhammer.
Yeah, I really
If
like
you've
the
seen
power
any
armor.
piece of 40K marketing, you know exactly what
Yeah,
Space
the
Marines
classics.
because they get plastered everywhere. The faction has a unique combat doctrine. buff
Maybe not the
that
blue. There was
various
the
weapons
white
depending
ones
on
in
your
one of the
as long as your whole army
cinematics
is
I
made
watched.
up of
Is
Space Marines. They're broken
one
up
of the
into chapters,
Astartes ones
and
that
additional
looked really
focus
cool. It was like
of the entire
white
army
and
is
gold.
made up of that single chapter.
It's really
during
neat.
That chapter's
See
specific
if
favorite
they're in here
doctrine.
somewhere.
Overall, their units
The
tend to
blue
be
is cool
resilient
too.
and jack of all trades style that are generally decent at both melee and shooting and rely on a lot of overlapping character auras to supercharge their units. They have a very wide stable of playable units, and that gives them a very flexible game plan. And each chapter sub-faction has its very own list of stratagems, abilities, and unique units that they can take.
See the guy down in the front. He has his helmet on his hip, and it's like an all red helmet. Is that like a commander or something?
So buckle up.
Is he like the lead guy?
For a little while. First off, Black Templars. No one told them that the Crusades were finished 39,500 years ago, so they paint their armor black and wear problematic iconography on their tabards. The faction can't take psychers, so they focus on chaplains instead and have some very.
I think someone was telling me that
they also focus mostly on melee infantry.
the Hell's Reach that I reacted to was
Blood Angels are space
the Black Templars, most like problematic
just like Black
faction
Templars, they also have
of the Space Marines.
Focus almost exclusively on jump pack
Interesting.
and deep striking. Imperial Fists, also Crimson Fists, which are a successor, which use basically the same abilities, are yellow or blue, I guess, in the case of Crimson Fists, but they paint their fists crimson, which makes a lot of sense, and get bonuses for blowing up vehicles and also shooting bolt guns and other bolt-style weapons. Iron Hands are a vehicle-focused chapter that bring a lot of really straightforward synergies. They give their guys invulnerable saves, they give flat bonuses to hit or bonuses to their armor save, which makes them very good at buffing a wide variety of units, but it's mostly vehicles. They are vehicle-focused. Raven Guard are a long-lost enclave of Green Day fans that are supposed
Green Day
to be
fans.
covert operatives, but end up on the tabletop not doing that at all. Instead, they rely on forward deploying and reserve mechanics to deliver an almost unstoppable alpha strike if they go first, and also mostly lose if they go second. They're also kind of fast and good at killing big characters, so if that's something you need, call in the Raven Guard. Salamanders are a solid all-rounder faction focused on dealing ridiculous
Salamander. I don't know what that
melee and at close
symbol
range
is,
range,
but it doesn't look like a
especially
salamander to me. It looks more like a dragon.
They're
But
also
what do
pretty
I
good
know?
defensively and have some cool reactive stratagems that help them brick up pretty well. White Scars, on the other hand, are a super fast melee specialist sub-faction that can duck in and out of combat and deal ridiculous damage once all of their buffs are
It's like the Shazam logo.
Ultramarines are everyone's boring cousin who ran away from home to join the Blue Man Group. They're kind of a jack-of-all-trades sub-faction with a lot of
I'm thinking that
powerful
the
characters that tends to
gotta let me
play
know the
slow,
white and gold.
defensively
I think
oriented brick style
probably the
that have a couple
Ultramarines
reactive
from the
abilities
symbol
that are
there.
Space Wolves are another melee
Or Space
focused
Wolves,
chapter
maybe.
that specializes in not giving charges, but this time receiving them and fighting well on their own terms. They have a lot of defense.
That's a cool logo.
Charge and fight phase manipulation effects that can tilt melee combat.
My mascot is a wolf. I really
Dark
like
Angels
wolves.
are one of the weirdest Space Marine sub-factions. In and of itself, it's broken up into three sub-factions, I guess. The Deathwing, which are ridiculously resilient Terminators. The Raven Wing, which are ridiculously fast bikers. And everyone else who shoots people. They tend to provide the chapter with an above
And the people that shoot
can also
people.
sometimes shoot in melee.
You know, those
This makes
guys.
Dark Angels one of the most flexible and powerful Space Marine chapters out of the list. Also, they might be a Chaos Legion if everyone in every video comment section and every video mentioning Dark Angels is to be believed. Lastly, Death Watch is another weird chapter in that they interact with the Space Marine doctrine mechanics much differently than everyone else. They're able to pick which doctrine they benefit from each round instead of progressing them sequentially, but in exchange, they don't get a special super doctrine ability that triggers when they're
Or maybe it was Death Watch. I don't think that kind of sounds familiar too. Yeah, let me know again. Sorry, I'm not really sure which one was depicted in Hell's Reach. Might have been Death Watch.
Intercessors, or a bunch of the recon specialized Phobos units like infiltrators, eliminators, and reavers, for example, which gives Death Watch some very unique and interesting army builds. Now let's move on to the other Imperium sub-factions. Next up, we have Adeptus Sororitas, who are kind of awkwardly fetishized bondage nuns, complete with giant boobs that are glued onto their power armor. They use a unique
okay.
to bank rolls for later use.
What?
Performing particularly pious
interesting.
Acts, giving them the ability to remove a lot of randomness and inconsistency from their game plan. This gives them the ability to get long threat ranges with automatically successful charges, or hit way above their weight class just by subbing in automatic 6 damage wound rolls, for example.
And are these chainsaw swords? Because that's really cool.
3 models with, while decent invulnerable saves, kind of questionable armor saves. Basically, the opposite of that is the Adeptus Custodes, who are the Emperor's personal bodyguards and repeated targets of a meme that I don't fully understand. They're hyper elite with about the most expensive cost per wound.
Oh, like Space Spartans, yeah.
It's protected by layers of insane defensive stats and abilities.
I like the blue like electricity going on their
excellent control of the fight
on their weapons.
Powerful melee stats on every single unit in the faction.
Very cool.
Lots of reactive stratagems so that they can dictate their opponent's fights. The Adeptus Mechanicus are machine men from Mars. Or maybe also they're just sentient toasters.
Sentient toasters.
The brave little toaster.
Appropriate for being
a little toaster that could.
Nice. Binary. Adeptus Mechanicus just seeks to bring the most efficient gunline in the game and beat their opponents with math. They have a pretty weak command of the mid.
Are they like robo horses?
Units, but
very cool.
Some of the best shooting in the
some of the stuff is like so detailed and like squished down. Even on my like decent sized TV that I play on, it's like kind of like
military guys who still haven't realized for some reason 40,000 years on that World War II has been over for a really long time. They combine cheap, fast.
Yeah, it's kind of that like Transformers effect. Like there's so many little intricate pieces, it just all turns to mush.
Few choices use unique order mechanics that give powerful buffs to their infantry and some of their vehicles.
At least it's not moving around.
Knights are the other half of Chaos Knights. They're a faction entirely made up of big, stompy battle robots.
Very intricate little
knight varieties alongside
little figures. I'm not sure how big these are. I'm assuming they're like this big.
Damage in contrast to the Chaos Knights, and have some minor synergies with
that's all I've ever seen.
Adeptus Mechanicus. Now, lastly, in all the factions in Warhammer 40k, we're going to talk about the Grey Knights, who are technically a Space Marine chapter.
What the heck? That looks cool.
Any of the special Space Marine mechanics. They're literally just knights in shining armor who fight demons and get bonuses to do so, but also demons get the ability to respawn units that are killed by Grey Knights. So it's
okay, the graphic on the right looks really cool.
Every unit in a Grey Knight's army is a psyker and gets bonuses.
Kind of disappointed by the actual figures, but that's okay.
For the best psychic phase in the entire game. The faction uses their psychic powers to pursue a finesse-oriented game plan by teleporting units around the map, shooting or moving out of phase, firing indirectly, or just increasing their survivability and being really tanky. The faction also uses a unique Tides of the Warp mechanic to give their Psyker units increased survivability, ranged, melee, or psychic damage output, all of which can be swapped with a spell. Pretty cool faction, but sequencing the psychic powers and order of operations is very important when you are playing them. So that's it. That is every faction in Warhammer 40.
All right.
Summarized for your convenience. Watching all the if you're into that stuff.
I didn't mean to do that, but yeah. All right. Yeah. Thank you again for suggesting that. If anyone else has any other video suggestions of any kind, I've been really enjoying these 40k stuff. So if you have more, shoot it my way. But yeah, I'll see y'all in the next one. Thank you.